Hey friends, Angela Harrington here, faith deconstruction coach, helping you untangle from toxic religion and recover from religious trauma. I was just working on some cool stuff for some of my coaching clients and wanted to pop over here because there's a question that I get over and over and over and over. And it's about why is it so hard to make decisions during faith deconstruction? And I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there. I mean, people basically say it's just about, you just have to like suck it up and make a decision. But there are three key reasons that it's challenging to make decisions during faith deconstruction. And I've also got a couple of tips on what you can do about that. So let's dive in. I think the first one that's probably the easiest one actually is there's just it can be overwhelming sometimes to make decisions because there is a plethora of information, right? There are a bajillion opinions and a bajillion different sites that you can go to, and there's just a lot of information right now. And while I am a huge fan of this, the best thing that you can do is reducing the amount of information that you're taking in. Now, I know this sounds counterintuitive because part of the way, part of what happens in an unhealthy system is that we only consume a little bit of information and it's all the same. And it kind of supports or reinforces our bias. It supports what our environment, what our community, what our church, whatever. It supports what we already believe to be true. So you've got to get out of those sources. Yes, you do absolutely need new and different information. But I see a lot of people in deconstruction go way too far. And what happens is now they're drowning in information, right? There's so many brilliant voices out there. There's so many people who are just phenomenally smart and are teaching about all of the different issues, all of the different struggles that led us to faith deconstruction in the first place. And that's good. But what you have to be careful is you can't listen to them all at the same time. You just can't. Like, all that's going to do is overwhelm you and make it even harder and harder to make decisions. So the best tip that I'm going to give you on this one is it's okay to unfollow some people and it's okay to tune out some voices and try to tackle one big topic at a time. Okay. Also make sure that not everyone that you're listening to is a screamer, because even if they're screaming about good things and they're calling your attention to good things, listening to screamers all the time is going to keep your nervous system really agitated. And it's hard to process information when your nervous system is agitated. We're going to talk about that more in just a second. But my advice with the overwhelming amount of information is take a step back from some of your sources, especially if they're sources that you already understand. If they're people that you've grown up with and you know what their opinion is and you know how they feel about particular topics, stop listening to them for a little bit and get some different voices, but don't try to like reconcile everything in real time. Okay. You've got to have time to rest. You can't be sucking in information 24/7 and have any sort of peace about it. Okay. So too much information, take a step back. That one's kind of easy, right? Easy to say, not always easy to do, but set some healthy boundaries and just carve out some time where you don't have people jabbering in your ear all the time. All right. Reason number two, it's hard to make decisions, or even just saying it's hard to process information during faith deconstruction, is because you've been taught, in most cases, if you're in deconstruction, it's because you're coming out of an unhealthy religious system and unhealthy faith environment. And most of the time, you're taught not to trust yourself. You're taught not to trust your feelings, not to trust your intuition, not to just trust this inner knowing that something is good or this inner knowing that something is not good. You're taught to defer to the people who are leading the system. Why? Well, because that's what upholds the system, right? That's what allows the people in power to stay in power. Because if you're taught to trust your voice and if you're taught to like listen to your own intuition and kind of, do your own thing, where are they getting power from? Right? Because the people being oppressed, people being taught not to trust themselves will always uphold the existing system. It'll always keep power where power already is, right? And so part of what we're doing in deconstruction is learning to trust ourselves. And it's not nearly as easy as taking a few people off of your social media. But what you can do is start trusting yourself with little things. Just start trusting yourself with little things. And if you have been around for a minute, and if you've seen the Deconstructing Faith Summit, a couple of years ago, we had Amanda Waldron on, and she gave us this fantastic question. When you're bumping up against things and you don't know whether you should trust yourself or not, you're feeling pulled to do things the way you always have, but you're also feeling this like this disconnect, like this discontent of like, maybe that's not the right thing, but I don't know which way to go. I don't know what voices to trust. Ask yourself who benefits if you keep doing it the other way, right? So an example of this happens a lot. I know there's a lot of mamas on this page. The lack of self-care, the always doing stuff for your kids, for your families, for other people. Like, it's not just moms that do that, but it's one of the biggest things that moms struggle with, especially when they're trying to sort out their own faith, is that we're taught that like running ourselves until we're totally empty is godly, right? Well, is it? Or is that just allowing us to be exploited so the system can keep doing what it's doing? Yeah, that stings a little, right? Because we want to provide, we want people around us to be cared for and to be loved. The key is, are we doing it at our own detriment? And I don't just mean like staying up with someone who's sick occasionally. I mean like day in, day out, overextending, not having space to care for our physical health or our emotional health or relational health, right? Like how many of us have lost tons of friends because we've been so invested in, trying to be a provider that those other relationships are just completely gone. Not are they diminished for a season, but like they're gone, right? So how do we start learning to trust ourselves? Well, you've got to start trusting yourselves with the little things. Start with the little things. Start with this idea that when you feel like something is wrong, when you feel like you're tired, you feel like you're hungry, start with those. Start making little choices. Start checking in with yourself before you check in with others. And this one's challenging. And I've had some coaching clients get really frustrated with me because they'll ask me what the right thing is. And I'll say, I don't know. What do you think? Because what we're trying to do in deconstruction is to stop listening to all of the other voices, not just pick up another different doctrine that's slightly less toxic, but to actually untangle ourselves from the system that taught us not to trust ourselves. So the only way to trust yourself is to start trusting yourself. I know, right? It sounds so easy, but it's not. And it takes time. So be compassionate with yourself. So number one, too much information. And the best way to handle that is to take a step back. Just take a step back and also carve out spaces where you're not taking in information. Not every moment of your life has to be spent learning. Sometimes you just need play. Sometimes you just need rest or to breathe or to get an audiobook that's a guilty pleasure, right? Like there's got to be space for that too. Second thing, it's hard to make decisions and to process information because you've been taught not to trust yourself. So how do you start trusting yourself? Baby steps. Baby steps. Start by checking in and asking yourself what you want and then honoring it. Little baby steps. And then number three, it always comes down to trauma when we talk. It talks about, anytime we're talking about deconstruction, we have to talk about religious trauma. Not every single person in deconstruction has experienced religious trauma, but most of the people here and most of the clients that I work with, most of the people over in the cafe and in my group coaching programs, y'all have seen some trauma. You've seen some hard stuff. And so the number three reason that it's really challenging sometimes to make decisions and process information and make choices in faith deconstruction is because those unsafe spaces, especially relationships, unsafe relationships and spaces, and or a history of trauma are keeping you on high alert. Like you've been hurt. And your body is designed to try to keep you alive. So when we see threats and we are harmed by things, our body says, oh, hey, next time we see that coming, we need to react faster. And so the more time you spend in unsafe relationships, relationships that are abusive, relationships with codependency, relationships with gaslighting, relationships where you're just not heard or seen or valued the same way that other people in the relationship are. Those are all unsafe relationships, right? Our system, our brain is always on high alert. We're like, oh, that hurt us before, so we gotta try to avoid it this time, right? Do you know what happens? We've talked about this in a lot of different spaces, but do you know what happens when your body's on high alert? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? That's a big mouthful. We're just going to call it bear mode, because it's what happens if you're walking in the woods and a bear shows up, right? Your body's like, oh crap, there's a bear. We got to do something. We got to get away. And what happens is your body actually changes function. It shifts function. So like, this is normal day to day. Now we're in bear mode. And it's not just a, like, you know, it's not like a hard line, black and white. There's a whole range. There's a whole spectrum of responses here. Okay. So be careful not to get into that legalistic, like I'm either totally peaceful or I'm totally in bear mode, because there's a range, right? But what happens when we start creeping towards that range where it feels like we're in an unsafe space, our body starts shifting resources away from non-essential things and towards the things that are going to save your ass. Like the things like the big muscles, your heart goes faster, all these different things happen because your brain is like, hey, there might be a bear here. We think there's a bear, so let's react. Okay. So then what happens is like your heart rate goes up, your breathing gets faster because your body is trying to circulate more energy. But not every body system goes faster. Your digestive system slows down because who really cares? Like your body doesn't actually care if you're digesting yesterday's lunch because you're about to be somebody's lunch. So your body's prioritizing getting the heck out of there. So your heart, your lungs, different hormones are released into your body that do this. It's not like you're choosing it. It's just happening. Okay. The other thing that happens is that your senses start changing. So your hearing gets sharper, your eyes actually get bigger and get sharper. Your ability to perceive pain, this is really interesting, right? Your ability to perceive pain increases. So if you're living on the edge of this bear mode all the time, you may have a lot of aches and pains. You may smell things before other people smell them. Noises may be really loud and they may startle you, even though nobody else in the room feels like they're loud, right? That's because you're living right on the edge and you're starting to creep over towards this bear mode, okay? But again, if these are getting better, stronger, more energy, where's that coming from? Okay. And here's the thing that's really crucial when we talk about decision making is part of your brain is fired up. It's taking over, it's making all these things happen automatically. But the other part of your brain that deals with decision making, problem solving, like attention, some of those things that are less essential in a moment if you're actually being chased by a bear, they slow down. Or they might even get to the point where they're completely shutting down. So here's the double-edged sword, right? Here's why, you know, sometimes when we have an overactive or we've been conditioned to act quickly, our nervous system gets better and better and better at sensing oncoming trauma, or it doesn't even have to be total trauma, just crisis. The faster your brain gets, the faster it can kick into those automatic things that will hopefully keep you safe, the harder it gets to make rational, logic-based decisions. Think about that for a second, right? We're focusing on survival. So some of those higher brain functions, some of those things that are just not important in a crisis, they get turned way, way, way down. Don't believe me? Okay, so I've got an activity for you. Next time you're feeling just totally flooded, like you almost get in a car wreck, or there's a conflict, somebody screams at you online, or You know, a relationship feels like it's going sour and you're just feeling really amped up about that. Think about, try to make a decision in that moment about what you're going to have for breakfast tomorrow. Or what color socks you want to buy at the store. Or, you know, what kind of flowers you want to paint. What kind of flowers you want to plant in your yard next spring. Chances are really good that if you're down the road a little bit, it's going to be like, if you're the closer you are to being in full-blown bear mode, the harder it is going to be to access those questions, to answer those questions and to think about them, right? The flip side of that is that sometimes thinking about mundane things, sometimes getting out of that like moment of crisis can actually be better. It can help you to kind of de-escalate, right? It can help you kind of back down and de-escalate the bear mode, the response to chaos, okay? But if you're already in full tilt and that part of your brain is shut down, it's going to be really hard to access those things, right? So how do we get out of this one? I got Post-it notes. Those of you that haven't sat in on my training before, I'm old school. I'm Post-it notes, okay? You got to make it a priority to heal your trauma. You got to make it a priority when you're not in bear mode to build those muscles, to become more resilient, to learn how to settle your nervous system. Because, you know, if we could rate our nervous systems for just a second, like if 10 is bear mode and 0 is like asleep, totally chilled out, right? It's not just a 0 and a 10. There's a whole range there. So if you're spending your whole day-to-day waking hours at a 6, because you've seen some hard stuff, going from a 6 to 10 is going to happen real fast. But if you can get some healing, if you can slow down your nervous system and get into a more peaceful, less hypervigilant state, if you can back it down to like a 5 or a 4. Now, all of a sudden, when you start to see a threat, maybe it bumps you up a couple notches and it moves you closer to bear mode, but you're not in it, right? So you're building in skills, by building your muscles and learning how to process things, what you're doing is that you're giving yourself more reaction time. The bottom line is you have to teach your body that you're safe in these moments where it's just you. You have to feel safe in your own body. Now, does that mean that everything's perfect and nothing ever goes wrong? Of course not, right? Sometimes our bodies don't function the way we want them to. Being safe in your body isn't the same as pretending to be Pollyanna and just saying, oh, everything's great, okay? Being safe in your body is teaching yourself that although there may be threats out there, although there may be consequences of old actions or other relationships that are just not safe for you to be a part of, that you have your own back and that you are able to carve out space and nurture and care for yourself. So how do you do that? Got to go to therapy. Get a good trauma-informed therapist. And I'll be really honest with you. If you are working through religious trauma, don't go to a religious therapist. There are some people who offer pastoral counseling that aren't actually therapists, which means most cases there's no regulation. The code of ethics is totally different than it is for an actual therapist, somebody who has a license. There are people who are licensed. There are Christian counselors who are absolutely licensed. They hold a very high standard, lots of cool things, but some of those people still have trouble when it comes to faith. Have a real hard time separating, their religious beliefs and your religious beliefs, right? So I highly recommend, unless you already have a good relationship with somebody, I highly recommend getting somebody who is trauma informed, who understands where how to hold space for you and how to teach you to hold space for yourself, but isn't in a Christian counseling center. Because the last thing you need is to be evangelized or to be pressured to adopt a specific set of beliefs in a counseling setting. Hi, more religious trauma. More religious trauma is not what you need. So here you have to ask for help. Get in a community, get a good therapist, hire a coach. I'm a coach. There's a whole bunch of people that are coaches. Get some practice with deep breathing, learn mindfulness, things like meditation. I know all those things that require you to get quiet are really, really, really challenging when you're struggling to get quiet. So be kind to yourself and know that you're probably not going to jump into like 5 hours of meditation right out of the gate, right? Because it's going to be hard. It's a muscle that's not built. You can start by just doing some deep breathing. In all of my sessions, all of my trainings and stuff, we start with just a little bit of deep breathing. Why? Okay. Slowing our breathing is the opposite of what happens in bear mode. Remember, we said our heart races and our breathing goes faster. Well, if you're actively slowing your body down, then your brain is like, oh, hey, maybe we are safe, right? So doing some deep breathing, learning how to catch your breath, learning how to settle out those big, scary emotions and those things that are coming up in you anytime you're bumping into conflict. Learning how to do that when there is no conflict is going to give you stronger muscles, and it's going to give you the tools to be able to do it when there is conflict, right? It's why we practice. It's why we rehearse plays. It's why we, if you're a swimmer or a runner, or if you do any sport at all, you don't just show up for the games and the meets and the matches, right? You condition, you practice, you learn how to move your muscles in the way that's going to make you more efficient so that when it is time for a competition, your body knows what to do and your brain knows what to do, right? Same thing with this, okay? Give yourself the space to be really bad at it at first. Like, give yourself permission to just suck at getting quiet. Because you have to suck at getting quiet before you can actually get really good at being quiet, right? Nobody's born an expert, okay? So the third thing is learning how to deal with your trauma, learning how to calm your nervous system and how to not be in a constant state of bear mode, which is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? Learning how to calm your nervous system, building muscles, learning how to become more resilient requires support. So you have to support yourself. You can't be traumatizing yourself, but you also need support outside of you, even if it's just in the short term, okay? Therapy is important. Support is also available from faith deconstruction coaches like me. You can reach out and find out about private coaching, or $23, you can join the Wilderness community right now, which is a coaching community that's not on social media. So we do a lot on social media. I absolutely love it. Obviously, I'm here right now, but it's connected to our profiles, right? You just never know who's going to stumble on to a group that you're in. So my team and I have built a special place outside of social media where we're going to help you each month tackle topics. This month, we're talking about embodied decision making. So exactly what we're talking about here. How the heck do I get out of crisis mode, settle into my body, and learn how to sort through all this information? The goals for the community are to sort the healthy doctrines from the unhealthy ones, learn how to get out of that crisis mode, find connection and community without pressure to like be a good Christian. And we're going to do that through books. We got live teaching. We're going to have guest experts. There's free coaching. There's all kinds of different stuff that's happening in that space. So AngelaJHarrington.com, the Wilderness is right at the top of the website. I would love to have you in there. And if you join before January 31st, it is $23 a month. And you get over $300 in bonus coaching, courses, workshops, all that. And those are yours to keep as long as you're a member of the Wilderness. So I hope that I'm going to be able to see some of you in there, because we are just kicking it off, and it is, it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be incredibly supportive. And I have some special friends I can't wait to introduce you to that are going to share their magic. So I hope I will see you in there. Like I said, reach out on my website, AngelaJHarrington.com. There's a button for contact if you're interested in private coaching. I do have typically a couple spots of that, or you can join the wilderness and I can help you learn how to settle your nervous system, hold space for yourself, and sort through all of the complex emotions and feelings and all of the data that's coming in, all of the information that's out there without actually me telling you what to believe. Because that's not part of deconstruction. So let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear if you have any hacks or any shortcuts to help do some of these things that we've just talked about. Go out and try them and then come back and tell me how it was. I always love hearing from you and hearing how your deconstruction is going. Talk to you again soon.